Ahlan, Maui and Trizzy here. We are so excited to talk about our time in the glorious Siwa Oasis located in western Egypt, very close to its neighboring country, Libya. We spent a quick 3 days there and realized that wasn't enough because we fell in love with the landscape, culture, food, and people. You'll definitely want to hear and see about the beautiful salt lake that you could float in. So let's start with how we got to Siwa. Thanks to the amazing tour operator, Toritos, we got to experience a section of Egypt that is extremely difficult to get to. Why is it so hard to get to? Because it's a 9-hour car ride from Cairo. Our first day, we got picked up at our hotel in Giza, the Mamluk Pyramids Hotel, at 5 in the morning. The founder of Toritos introduced himself to us as well. It was a nice gesture for Gamal to meet us before the sun even came out. Our private driver drove us to a nearby food place to pick up some breakfast. The spot was a local Egyptian restaurant called Gad, and we had no clue what we were in for. We just ordered what we were familiar with, like French fries, falafel, eggs. But when it came out, they were individually wrapped in a pita bread. We never would have thought French fries and lettuce would make any sense in a pita bread. But this place made it make sense, and we were blown away by how delicious it was. We hit the road while scarfing down our surprisingly good breakfast. We paid $500 each for a 2 nights, 3 days private tour that included round-trip transportation, meals, accommodations, and excursions. Oh, and because they're called Toritos, they gave us Doritos for the long car ride. We passed several checkpoints heading to Siwa, so remember to have your passport and a copy of your passport with you. The passing scenery were developing towns on the outskirts of Cairo, deserts, and open fields with wild camels roaming about. Our car had 2 rows in the back, so we both got to stretch out our legs in our own space. Halfway to Siwa, we made a lunch stop at a town called Marsa Matruh. It sits along the Mediterranean Sea west of Alexandria. We filled up at a popular local kushri restaurant. Not eating for a few hours made us very hungry and excited to eat. But by the end of our meal, we had to be rolled out of the restaurant because of the carb-filled dish. Kushri is an Egyptian dish that has rice, pasta, vermicelli noodles, lentils, and chickpeas mixed with a tomato-based sauce, topped with fried onions, all that in one dish. Delicious, but extremely filling. As we were ready to tap out in the car for the second half of the ride, our driver surprised us with ice cream from a local chain called Aza Ice Cream. It looked too good to not eat, so somewhere in our stomach we made room for dessert. We finished the ice cream at a quick pit stop to feel the breeze of the Mediterranean Sea. The views were striking, as this is our first time here, and we of course had to touch the freezing water of the sea that carries the importance of a trading route amongst 3 continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. After a few minutes and photos at the coast, back on the road we go for another 4 hours. Keep in mind that if you're going to use the restrooms at pit stops, you'll have to pay for usage. When we got to Siwa, it was still bright out, so we got to see what the town was like. It's for sure a small town vibe compared to Cairo, Luxor, and even Aswan. We dropped off our belongings at the Dream Lodge Hotel, a small local accommodation that we'll be staying at on the second night. But we'll be heading out to the desert for the first night to sleep under the stars. As we made our way out to the desert campsite, we had a few places to visit amongst the sand dunes. But first, this was our car ride. Dune bashing was so much fun. We were catching sand on our faces and in our hair and enjoying the desert roller coaster. We just prayed we wouldn't flip over while going down the steep dunes. One of the stops we made in the desert, also known as the Great Sand Sea, was the Bir Wahidi Sulphuric Hot Springs. It's safe to soak in, and the water from the springs help irrigate the surrounding garden, making this an epic desert oasis. Nearby was another brief stop, the cold lake. Our last stop before heading to our campsite was to watch the sunset and drink Siwa tea, a lemongrass tea with optional sugar. Our incredible guide for this trip was Mohammed. He suggested we meditate atop the sand dune while the rest of the team set up a fire to brew the tea. It didn't take long for us to fall in love with Siwa. The experience so far has been nothing short of amazing. When the sun had set, we transferred over to our home for the night, the Tasili camp. The site from afar looked like it was lit up by string lights, but as we approached the entrance, we soon realized that there were tiki light torches and fuel-ignited canister made from recycled soda cans scattered around the dunes. It took our breath away. We felt spoiled. The campsite was big with the Bedouin-style communal areas and tents. Restroom was included, but it was a walk to get to in the dark, so prepare to bring a flashlight. Dinner was still cooking when we were settling our stuff down. We learned a new cooking technique, a Bedouin style that involves preparing food in underground pits in the sand. We watched as they pulled our dinner out from beneath that had been cooking for an hour underground. We sat on blankets and pillow to enjoy our dinner. A smoky and tender chicken that came with rice, veggies, potatoes, pita bread, and tahini. The Bedouin-style dinner setup was unforgettable. As entertainment, there were fireworks popping off during dinner. There were maybe 2 other parties there, so the experience was very intimate. As digestion, we walked around the camp and climbed to the top of a short mountain. Since light pollution was slim to none in the middle of the desert, we took some photos to capture the stars. Day 1 ended just like how it started, beyond exceptional. We went to our tent and nestled in our warm sleeping bags as the night grew cooler. Our morning was filled with gratitude. There's no better way to watch the sunrise than in the middle of the desert. As calm as the morning started, it quickly took a turn when we started sandboarding down the dunes. Trizzy's booty wasn't cooperating sitting on the board, so it was better to just stand up. But Maui preferred to sit. These dunes weren't that steep though. It was a morning workout walking back up the fine sand. Travel tip, wear old shoes that you'll be okay tossing out at the end of the trip because it'll just be full of sand. We drove back to town to our hotel after our morning activity. Back at the Dream Lodge, we showered, changed into our clothes for the rest of day 2, that included our swimwear, and ate breakfast. Olives are big in Siwa. You'll see a lot of olive trees around. So of course, our breakfast involved their native olives with fresh tomatoes and cucumbers, hard-boiled eggs, beans, pita bread, and tahini sauce that smothered over more veggies. A healthy breakfast that we could make back at home. We had to fuel up as much as we can because day 2 was a busy day of moving around Siwa. And we began with our first stop to the Shali fortress. You'll think this place was a town of its own, which practically was back around the 13th century when they created this fortress out of mud and mineral salt water. It was built as protection for the Siwi people from being invaded by those of the Bedouin tribes. This brilliant structure still stands firm, however, parts of it have been eroded due to rainfall, which doesn't happen often. Throughout the fortress, there are some shops and residents, but very few. It's free to go to, and you'll notice one of the entrances has a row of souvenir and spice shops, bazaars, and restaurants. Our next stop was the Dakrour mountain, where the Syaha festival, a celebration of reconciliation, is held annually in October when the full moon is out. Residents gather here to celebrate, eat, and dance while bonding and forgiving each other. At the end of the 3-day festival, all will be renewed as equals. We had just missed it since we were there in November. Next up is one of the most popular temples in Siwa, the Oracle Temple, initially known as Temple of Amun, where a visit from Alexander the Great gave this landmark its historical significance. You can view the vast oasis of Siwa from the top of the temple. So, in Luxor you have the Valley of the Kings, in Cairo you have the Pyramids of Giza, and here in Siwa you have the Mountain of the Dead. The name says it all. After the Oracle Temple, we visited the Mountain of the Dead, a mountain that housed tombs, one belonging to Pharaoh Amun. We got to enter his tomb and see the original paint that has been preserved. Tour guides are not allowed inside the tomb to help preserve the paint from the humidity of talking too much. This mountain has burial sites from the bottom to the top. You'll see holes in the ground that tombs were buried in. It's a very honeycomb-like site from afar. The next stop, you won't stop dreaming about. Welcome to the Siwa Salt Lakes. A salt mine with many pools for people to float in. It's impossible to drown in this water with extremely high salinity, but it is possible for it to cause some discomfort if you have any open cuts or get the water in your eye. These salt lakes act as treatments to skin and digestive issues, body aches, and mental health. We got in the water and thought it would be warm, but it was pretty cold. Nonetheless, it's one of the reasons why we wanted to travel to Siwa, and it did not disappoint. You can buy salt that was produced here back in town, which we did, so our next bath will have lavender-scented salt from Siwa. We only wish we had more time at the Salt Lakes, but no worries, because every stop on this tour is just as dope as the one before it. Like our next stop, Cleopatra's Spring, a cold spring that people can't dip in. One of many myths around this landmark is that brides would soak in here before their wedding day to feel beautiful, because Queen Cleopatra once swam this spring, blessing it with her presence. We didn't go in because we just wanted to grab a drink and relax at the cafes surrounding the pool. We went up to the roof of the Jubana Cafe and ordered basil tea and Arabic coffee. We love the Bedouin aesthetic of the cafe, where we sat on pillows with short tables overlooking Cleopatra's Spring. Beware of the flies while enjoying your beverage though.
We just figured out what these souvenirs were for.
For the flies.
For the flies.
They saw us like this.
We drove back into town to grab some lunch at Abdu Restaurant, a local eatery that filled us up and beyond. We had potato and vegetable stew with roasted chicken, salad, pita bread, and tahini. I guess a heavy mid-afternoon lunch after visiting 6 historical sites was needed, but as flavorful and tasty as this meal was, we couldn't finish. The portions were very, very generous. We caught the sunset on a private island, the Abu Bakr Island, which is basically a handmade property. Similar materials used to create the Shali fortress, mud and mineral salt water, were made to build this open-air structure. We later found out that this island is owned by the family of our tour guide. When the tide is low, you're able to walk along a narrow, rocky path to get to the island. It was a fun adventure and even more fun exploring this unique property that had plenty of seating areas to host gatherings and watch the sunset. Another stop where we wish we had spent more time, but we had to get back before it gets dark. Our last stop before dinner was to the traditional Siwa House, a small local museum displaying fashion and artifacts from ancient Siwa and how houses were back in the day, along with the history of Siwa Oasis. Traditional homes were very economical because materials used to build them could be grown in the garden, gathered from trees, and sourced from the salt lakes. Dinner was at the same spot, Abdu Restaurant. once we saw the kofta, we magically became hungry and dove right in. And again, the portions were very generous. The kofta was accompanied with salad, pita bread, and tahini. We can see why Doritos chose this restaurant to feed us for 2 meals. It's a great local spot and we can't recommend it enough. After the agenda was done, we asked our driver if we could check out some shops around town. We stopped at a place to buy some Siwan coffee to give to family and friends back home. Then we went back to the vendors around the Shali fortress. It was a cool area to see during the day, so we wanted to go check it out at night too. This is where we bought our lavender salt crystals. The difference between the vendors in Siwa versus major cities like Cairo and Luxor is that the vendors in Siwa don't bug you. They let us have a comfortable, quiet, non-pressure shopping experience, and it made us want to buy something because we can actually concentrate on the product we want. We should also tell you that things in Siwa are even more affordable than in Cairo. We went up to a rooftop cafe for a late night tea because it had an epic view of the Shali fortress at night. But as soon as the last sip hit our mouths, we were done for the day. Ready to go back to the hotel and call it a night because the next morning will be a 9-hour drive back to Cairo. Going straight to bed didn't happen. We noticed the hotel next to ours had a large fire pit blazing and there were people still up. The hotel was the Panta Lodge. So we went to check it out and drank another tea. Can't get enough tea. We for sure were done for the night, definitely ready to go to bed. As we paid the bill, the hotel manager asked if we wanted to check out their salt cave. Somehow our readiness to go to bed wasn't there anymore. Our curiosity took its place and we went to check out the salt cave. After a convincing explanation of the room, instructions, and its benefits, we were buried under small salt crystals from neck to toes. The benefit of being buried under salt is similar to floating in the salt lake. It's an anti-inflammatory method for any aches and pains, helps you relax more, sleep better. For an hour in the salt cave, we paid about $10 USD per person. We brought ourselves back to our room to end the night. We're really going to bed this time. Sadly, our time in Siwa was done after 2 quick nights. It's a trip to remember and to recommend to others. Before we left the hotel the next morning, we had breakfast and thanked our Siwa tour guide, Mohammed, for immersing us into his wonderful culture. If a 9-hour drive is too brutal for you, there is an option to fly to Marsa Matruh International Airport from Cairo. This will cut down half the time of the drive, which is 4.5 hours to Siwa. But the flights are restricted to only the summer months and only operate on certain days of the week. If you're interested in booking with Doritos, we'll leave their information in the description. Videos and photos don't do justice to how gorgeous Siwa is, but we hope we showed you enough to convince you to visit. Don't forget to check out our other videos about our wonderful time in Egypt under our playlist, Egypt is for Everybody. Thanks for watching Maui and Trizzy. Subscribe and get notified for more adventures from us. Shokran!